and welcome to today's episode of Becoming Together, where we are navigating the messy middle. And I am taking you on the journey with me as I am growing, evolving, and expanding. And so, whether you are here to get some tools and strategies yourself, maybe you're just coming for comfort to know that you're not alone in this, or maybe you're coming for community, I'm glad to have you here. And today we are going to talk about my journey, how I got to be where I am, from pre-med to social worker to CEO, and how this was not the path at all that I thought I was going to be on. And so I'm going to talk about my journey as well as what you can kind of expect from the content I plan to put out, that it's not just so much yapping. I do hope you're able to leave with some tools, some strategies, some skills that can help you. And so I am going to dive right in and talk about my journey and what that has looked like for me. So I come from a single parent household. I come from an immigrant household, and I am the youngest of three. So I first, in the undergraduate space, right? I think it's kind of where most of this started. I was pre-med. I was on the journey to become a doctor, I think like most immigrant children are. And mostly because I just thought it would be something that was cool. It was interesting. I think even from such a young age, I definitely had a wanting of like status, if you will. However, I also realized I really enjoyed understanding people and like why people do the things they do, what makes people different, what makes people the same. And so I was actually an undergrad, a psych major and Spanish minor. That is just how I started out. And to be fair, it was like a little too easy. So by sophomore year is where I was like, I want to challenge myself. I want to do something. And that's kind of where I landed with the pre-med stuff. And so I started taking my pre-med classes sophomore year, still being a psych major and a Spanish minor. And so I graduated and I knew I wasn't ready for, or was about to graduate, I'll say, and wasn't ready to go right into medical school. I wanted to take a gap year, mostly because I tried studying for the MCAT at first and like it just was not working out. Your girl has never been the best standardized test taker. And so I was taking a gap year. I came across an AmeriCorps program called City Year that someone had told me about. And what was really attractive to me was the fact that I can go and live in Los Angeles. And so City Year has sites all over the country. And I wanted to get as far away as I could from the East Coast and from New Jersey. And I thought California was like always just so dreamy for me. I've never been further than like really the East Coast. And so I got accepted. Remember telling my mom I was going to do it. And she was like, no. And by this point, I already had a lot of the like independent woman stuff in me. And I remember being like, really, I wasn't asking. And I think it is that mindset that I've already had of just like, when I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm just going to do it. And so I moved to Los Angeles. I knew absolutely zero people to do this program. And what we did and what City Year continues to do is working within the education system to essentially help fill the gaps within these like under-resourced and underserved populations within the school districts. And so my team, we were working at elementary school in Watts, which is famous for like the Watts riots that happened in the 60s. And for me, that was a very eye-opening journey around what it looks like to be immersed in like real supports and services with folks in need, because I come from a low income background. However, the people I was surrounded with, like my friends and all that kind of stuff, like they weren't always in that same space. I always went to Catholic school. Even though I'm not Catholic. And so from kindergarten through college, I was always in Catholic school. And so it's also like my first look into like public school and like all this different stuff. And so while I was there, I was still going on interviews for medical school. And so each time I'm going on this interview for medical school, I'm like, I hope they don't ask me why I want to be a doctor, because I didn't have a compelling reason, right? Like I knew I could do it. I did fairly well with my sciences. I did okay on that MCAT when I eventually took it. But I just knew in the heart of hearts, like I didn't really have like a passion for it, right? And I remember talking to a doctor when I was in LA. It was like my friend's boyfriend's dad. And he had asked me, he was like, if you could do, can you see yourself doing something else? And I was like, for sure. And he was like, then do that. Because he just saw where like the healthcare system was going and all this different stuff, right? And so for me, that was just very helpful to get some additional thinking and backing behind like where I already was at. And so I finished up City Year. I tried to stay in LA. I was applying for jobs out there. Like that wasn't working. I already had jobs lined up here in New Jersey. And so I came back to Jersey again now trying to figure out like what's next. Really loving the work I did with City Year, to be honest. And they wanted me to stay. They actually wanted me to become like a team leader. But they pay pennies and like student loans started to kick in. And I was like, I can't do this financially any longer. And so but again, I really loved that work. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher per se, like a K-12 teacher, but I did love the work with like supporting communities in that capacity. And that is when I stumbled upon social work. At the time, like most folks thought that social work was you work for the government, you like go and like take kids away or whatever. But like a smart person, I did some more research and discovered the vast um, opportunities that exist within the social work field. And so I knew I didn't want to be a therapist. So if you remember, I was a psychology major. So even as a psych major, like I knew I didn't want to be a therapist. Always just been like, I don't want to do like one-on-one therapy, just not my thing. Like I like to help people, yes, like move through problems and like help them like get to the next thing. But I just cannot stand. I shouldn't say cannot stand. I just struggle with like folks just like being in the same place over and over and over again. And then especially as a therapist, you're not supposed to like tell people what to do. You have to like guide them and let them come to it. And I'm like, nah, like do this. Uh yes, I come across social work, but I knew that I didn't want to be a therapist, right? I knew I would kind of always want to work in organizations or different institutions or, what have you. But I did like the idea around understanding how to work with individuals. And so I did a clinical program through Boston University, again, with that, like always that mindset that I knew I wanted to work with individuals, but want to always extrapolate to something greater, right? And how can we take what's needed on that micro level and like really expand it out. And so yeah, so I'm working there. I'm doing different internships. I'm again still very centered on like education and students, and so I'm doing internships that allows me to work with students in different capacities or just young people like in different capacities. And so it was then my first official job after graduation. I worked throughout graduate school. And I guess one thing I should note here, one of my jobs while I was in graduate school, it was part-time, was a family support coordinator for early intervention. Early intervention is a program that supports infants through toddlers with special needs and disabilities. And so in my role, I covered, I think about 6 counties in New Jersey. And then part of that was to be what they called like a master trainer. And so anybody who was new to early intervention in the entire state, each month we would do a like 6-hour training. And so the only reason I'm saying this is because I think it's very relevant to a lot of the speaking that I do now. I was like an absolutely terrible trainer originally. I understood like working with folks with disabilities, but like not as intimately to like train on the process for providers. So it'd be like speech therapists, occupational therapists, case managers, all this kind of stuff, like understanding how to write these like plans and work with families in this capacity. Like I just didn't have that, especially I was still like in graduate school. And so I was just like, I remember I had a boss who then turned like friend slash mentor who would stand at like the back of the room and like give me all of these like cues. She'd be like, slow down or like speak up. Cause I just was absolute trash. Like I was absolutely terrible. And so, but because I had to do that for like 6 hours, like monthly, it did allow me to get very comfortable training, right? And being in front of a group of strangers and helping them to understand things that could be a little more complex and really being able to drill it down into something that's more digestible for them so that they can easily execute and like utilize what's being taught. I need a sip of my iced coffee. And so my first job then after I officially graduated is I went to work at a university, right? I went to work at Rutgers University here in New Jersey. It is our largest institution in the entire state, about 40,000 students. And I was particularly working with a first generation low income college students. And I was like, at the time, like, this is my dream job. I've always wanted to, again, support these certain kinds of communities. I come from these communities. I was a first gen college graduate myself, coming from a low income family. And especially even through all the different things I've been doing up until that point, it was always just supporting under resourced and underserved communities. And I had gotten this job because at the time, the internship that I was doing, one of the, I think she was like the administrative assistant of the program I was working for. And she was like, hey, like, I know somebody who works at Rutgers and like they're looking for something for this position. And I'm actually having him come to like, speak at this like thing. We were like putting on an event or whatever on Greek life or something like that. And he came like spoke. So she was like, make sure you shake his hand and like meet him, let him know that you're graduating soon, all that stuff. Right. And I do plan on having some episodes around like your network, and the importance of like really having good network and importance of putting yourself out there, telling people what you're trying to do. Because I do think a lot of people in this world do actually want to help you. But so those are, some things I'm talking about. So anyway, got this job working at Rutgers now. And I think within like 2 months of being there, I was like, and when you work at places like Rutgers or these large institutions, like people want to be there for a long time, because there's really great benefits, right? Like if I wanted to get another master's degree, I can get that for free. If I wanted to get a PhD, I can get that for free. If I have kids and I still work there, they get to go to that school for free. And so I remember one of my coworkers, he had been there for 20 something years. He was commuting like over an hour a day. But it's because he was waiting for all of his 3 children to finish going through Rutgers so then he could like leave. And he did that like when his last kid graduated, like the next month he was out. And so it's a place that like when you are there, people are like, you stay there, you get pension, right? State pension, all that stuff. But my biggest issue was like, how do I say this politically correct? It's difficult to work in places, and this is like, it wasn't just, only for Rutgers. This was honestly for a lot of places I'd already been working at. By this time I'm in my mid 20s, or so. Yeah, like 26 ish. That you want to do the work that is really going to help these communities, but then there's politics. There's all these red tape and all these other things that are kind of really getting in the way of doing the work that's needed. And I had a coworker, turned such a dear friend, who was the one who tapped to me and was like, hey, have you ever like thought about doing your own thing? Have you ever thought about running your own business? And by that time, like, I think I had maybe thought about literally like, the highest I'd seen for myself was like being an executive director of a nonprofit, or maybe even running my own nonprofit, but like it was very much so in like nonprofit world. And so she had taught me, was like, think about doing something like yourself, right? You're so good with the students. Part of what I did in the role was I would do a lot of presentations, put on different programming. I created an entire conference and spearheaded the conference. Like I was doing a lot of that kind of work and being on stages or being in front of people. And so she was like, there's something about you that people are drawn to you. Students are drawn to you. You should think about doing your own thing. And so I created like the first iteration of my company, which was student success coaching. I thought I was going to work with like parents and their students around the intersection of mental health, wellness, and education. And so, I'm making Instagram posts and I was going to all these different events to table. I remember going on like Eventbrite and I would try and find events and I would set up a table, ask if I can come set up a table. I'll try and find a picture and like put them up here so you can kind of see what that looked like. But I was scrappy, right? I was like very scrappy around just trying to figure this out. This was before so much popped off on the internet of like what to do for a business, and there was no chat GPT and like all these things to like guide me. I just was like truly just like taking like my scrappy knowledge and daily thinking of like, how do I do this? Because as social workers, right, even though a lot of folks end up going into therapy and running their own business, like we're not taught business skills. And so, yeah, I remember I was doing that. I once got an email from somebody and she was asking me to come do like a workshop back at my alma mater, my undergrad at LaSalle in Philly. And it was the first time somebody ever paid me. They paid me $500. And I was like so excited. And I was like, oh, if this is $500 and I keep doing things like this, right? You're doing all the math, whatever. It was like that. I should have gotten paid a lot more than $500 for that. But it was, I think, the confidence that I needed, the affirmation I needed at that time of saying like, hey, like people actually want this thing that you are putting out. And so, yeah, I made these like journals and I was doing all this like talking and workshops and all this kind of stuff. And so I then went and like joined an official business program, or two of them, because I'm a Virgo and I do too much. And I joined these two business programs. I put them up here as well. And I just, because I knew that I was like, I need more structure. I need like just to understand like business, understand like how to do things differently. And so I joined one, which was like the Get Shit Done program, which it was her first time doing it. I met the person who's running it because, again, I had pitched myself. I saw on Instagram somebody was running this event for like women on like self-love and entrepreneurship or business or something like that. And I was like, hey, like, it was in New York City. I was like, if you need another panelist, I would love to be considered. I just like sent a DM, and she's like, oh my goodness, like so funny. Someone just dropped out. Like we have one more spot. Like, can you get to the city? I was like, yeah, I hop on the train. I'll be there, 45 minutes. And so the moderator was this woman named Alex, and Alex then went on to create this program. And so I was part of her first cohort. It was like $2,000. I think I definitely put it on a credit card, and it wasn't that long. Maybe it was like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. But it was 3 times a week, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, for at least like 2.5 hours each day. Where you're getting the information, you are getting community. So you're talking about your challenges, you're learning about different stuff. You also got like mentors. She had found 2 people who like come from the education world that can do one-on-ones with me. And so I was doing that. And so I would say it was a lot. And so by this time, my full-time job was a school social worker. And so I had accepted to work at a charter network as a school social worker, partly for 2 reasons. One, it was in a middle school, and that was like the only age demographic I had not worked with. So I thought that would be interesting. Like I did elementary school when I was in Los Angeles. I did high school for a year through my internship, and then I did higher education. So I was like missing that middle school year. And so I thought that would be cool. And then to be honest, the pay was like $25,000 more than I was making prior. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll do this. Even though, to be honest, I knew I would not like this job. One of my friends like warned me. She was like, you are not going to like charter school environment, just based off of how I am and the way I like perceive education and treating children, whatever. That's a different story for a different day. But also just like when I read through what I had to do in the job description, like it wasn't exciting. And I really knew I did not want to do this job. But again, I was lured in because I was like, I'll take a $20,000 for an extra $25,000. I'll do it. And again, I get to like fill this age gap. And so I was going into year 2 of being this school social worker. I'm trying to build like, my business on the back end. It's September and I joined these 2 different business programs. The Get Shit Done was more active. As I said, it was 3 days a week for 2.5 hours each day. And it concluded with an actual pitch, right? She like invited all these people virtually, and you had to give like a pitch about your business. And there was like, voting and favorites and whatever, prizes, winners. The other one was more so like a self-taught one. I think there was some kind of community aspect. I don't remember. But that was through Nicole Walters. And what I really liked about that, which is kind of the biggest catalyst here, was when you get started with her work, she tells you to write your quit day letter, which is like, what is a day you're going to like quit your job, your 9 to 5, and like go fully into your business. And so it was September of 2019. I joined these 2 programs and I wrote my quit day letter for June 30th of 2025, because, working in a school, at least for me, integrity wise, you don't really want to leave mid-school year, right? And so even though I was like really struggling, my husband was like, well, my boyfriend at the time, now turned to husband, was always just like, yo, like, are you okay? This job is a lot. Like, I'm working in like a really hard community and there's all these crises and all this stuff. Like there's just so much going on. But I knew, I didn't want to like leave mid-school year. And so I committed to finishing out that school year. But this was it. Meaning like I had these, however many months to get my ish together in my business. And so I went through the motions. I'm learning all this stuff. I switched my model from, instead of trying to work with parents and students, to now, going after schools and different organizations that like work with young people, switching from like a B2C to B2B, business to consumer to business model. And so that was really helpful. And then I think the biggest catalyst, honestly, was the pandemic. And by the time it was March 2020, the world was shutting down and everyone wanted to have all these conversations around mental health. And I know that was a huge like boom of my business. Now, it wasn't so much that as some advice people are saying, like, don't quit your job until you're making what you're making in your 9 to 5. Again, it was decision. I worked in a school, so it was a little bit different. And so the principal was like, hey, like, what are you going to do? And so she knew I had a business on the side. She knew I was kind of toying with this idea of like, do I want to stay? Do I want to go? Like, I don't know. And so, when it was time for renewing conversations, I told her I'm kind of like torn. She's like, cool, take a couple weeks, but like, you really have to decide because I need to know if I'm going to need to fill this position or not. And so I sat with this, I prayed with it. And even though my business wasn't making that much money yet, I did start to see traction, right? Because I had more availability. I was able to have more sales calls. I was able to talk to more people. I was able to get more bookings because my job wasn't taking up more of my time. And so I just started to see some of that evidence. And that was all I think I needed to say, like, let's go full force. Like, let's go right into this. I should add in here as like an asterisk. I did start being a therapist as well as this time, or maybe a little bit before. And just for extra money, again, I still did not want to be a therapist, but I was like, I have the credentialing right now. By that point, I had my license, but like the master's level license, not my clinical license. So I started also doing therapy on the side, but not really seeing many clients. Also wasn't making that much money doing it. Again, that'll be a different story for a different day around my thoughts around this whole licensure, clinical, all that kind of stuff. And I had also been accepted to be an adjunct professor. So that actually, we got the offer letter to be an adjunct at a community college from 2018. When I started as a school social worker, but I'd asked them to like pause it. I'm like, hey, I'm starting a new job. I don't know if I can do both. Yada, yada. Go full time in my business, June 30th, 2020. And it has just been a lot since then, whether it was through the services that we were offering. And so again, just kind of switched to this B2B model. I was working through trying to do these like trainings and presentations. I then developed an online course because everything was so digital and things were so online. And so I don't want to make this one so long. So I'll make that a whole different one of like the process of developing this online course, how I ran like essentially like a live pilot with students. I very, 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 very graciously got some students to say yes. I think they paid me $25 for like 4 weeks. But I created this like online course, both for students and for adults, even though now 5 years later, I've never sold the adult version. But again, different story for a different day. And that was really helpful and just kind of continued growing from there. But then along the way, knowing that I started to get that pull of like, I don't just want to be in education anymore. And so I had started with the branding of student success coaching. I then became Ignite EDU, which actually had 2 partners when I got started. Again, I'd save that story. I'm going to come back, watch all these notes and make a note of all the things I need to come back to and expand on. But yes, that was Ignite EDU. And so then I created Broderick & Company Consulting because I was getting, requests from different like Fortune 500 DEI groups and just like different people that were like, we're not students, but we, hey, do you like talk to young women or do you talk to women professionals or do you talk to like da-da-da? And so all that kind of started to evolve and change and grow. And then I wanted to do more intentional like B2C work. And so I launched a program called On Purpose with Purpose. And I'd gotten folks to enroll into that. And that was essentially a group program helping people to, as a title, right? How do you live and grow on purpose and with purpose? Really centering on the intentionality of just like the direction of your life. And my roles kind of serve as like structure and all this stuff, while also doing all the things in the education space. And then as time went on, more people just more started asking me like, hey, how did you like start your business? And they were just really curious about the business aspect of things, especially other social workers. And so like, I just like one-on-one, I started like taking on people here and there, just like other mental health professionals, other social workers, and just kind of sharing what I did and how I did it and giving tips and tricks, like, and then grew that and ran the social work entrepreneurship incubator and then started doing VIP intensives. And so again, I do plan on even expanding on that of the journey of running a group program, why I stopped my social work entrepreneurship incubator when all the other transitions that happened in there. Because there's like so many lessons and tips that I want to share with folks. And so, yeah. And then now we are kind of here, right? Yes, I'm still providing strategies and tips for folks. I usually do a lot around like speaking engagements too, on becoming a speaker and how do you get speaking engagements and growing a speaking business, because the speaking part of my work has probably become one of the biggest drivers of revenue. It's one of the reasons why I'm even doing this, right? Is that folks, when they can see me in action and they're in the spaces where I am using my voice to impact and to serve, it is transformational. And I'm very aware of that. So I've been helping folks with like speaking, and also again, still the stuff kind of going on the other side of my business and having these two different arms. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of create this episode just to kind of showcase like this journey. I think one, a lot of you probably have no idea who I am or like how this has come to be and the transition of my life and, you know, all the things. And I'm sure I've skipped over some stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to talk about this or I forgot to talk about that. And as I said, like I've just learned like so much along the way. I have learned so much along the way. And that's why I just want to be able to share as much knowledge and strategies and skills, and not just about business, like about how do we start being more intentional, right? I have obviously a lot of formalized training as a licensed social worker, but I find myself being kind of like a lifelong learner. And so I'm constantly reading a lot of books. I take a lot of what I read and I integrate that into my work, not just to build my work, but to like bring that knowledge into like what I'm sharing with other people as well. And so that is just, again, some of the things I plan to have with this is showing you in my evolution and growth in this. Yes, giving some strategies and tools along the way, but then also just separately having some really targeted conversations around things like mindset, like growth, resiliency, leadership, some maybe more technical things, again, around like program development, business development, speaking, just having a better platform to showcase and serve, so that everything's not just living in my brain or like on my Instagram stories, that I'm providing more opportunity for you all to understand me better, more opportunity for you to grow and learn along with me, learn from my mistakes if that is helpful for you. But again, it also could just be coming for comfort. I got a message from a friend, a friend, colleague, whatever, you know. Sorry if I'm not naming this correctly if you're listening to this. But every Monday through Friday from 8 to 9:15, I run an open work sprint. Right? Anybody around the world can come join on. I will put the link so you can join us. But one of the frequent attendees had made a comment asking me the other day, like, hey, like, when are you going to put out another episode? And she was referring to the one that I did in the fall. And I was like, you know, why? Like, do you have a question? Anything like you want me to talk about? She's like, no, like, I just really liked it. I'll show you the comment. I'm kind of butchering it, but it for me was very confirmational around like, people need more of these kinds of real conversations and not just like all of the polished versions of things and, you know, all the like how to do this and how to do this and make all this money and do all this stuff. Like, yo, like this stuff is hard sometimes. Stuff is hard a lot of the times. And let's be real about it and let's navigate this together. Let's grow. Let's become together. Than just only giving the highlight reel or only showcasing after the fact. And so I felt very affirmed with that. Even after that one from the fall, someone was asking for more. And so that's kind of my aim here, is to just continue to put out more content, more information for connection, for community. You might get some gems along the way, but it's also the opportunity selfishly for me to, practice like being more consistent and keeping promises to myself and knowing, I think I named this in the first episode, like I have really big audacious goals for my life and I am just not doing what I need to do to bring that to life. And I've done so many other things, right, that I've been consistent in. And me speaking and putting out my speaking on like public platforms outside of my Instagram stories has not been consistent. And, you know, I go to the conferences, I go to these rooms and people are always like drawn in, but it's kind of living and dying there. Christina, why are you not bringing this to other places? Hello? I don't know. Okay, that is all I have for today. I will be back with the next episode. I also plan to figure out, and feel free to give me some advice here. I, yes, love the video component and throughout the week, like I like will think of things and I'm like, oh, this would be good as a voice. So I guess if I turn this into like a really more formalized like podcast or something, I can be recording like the voice notes of this. I actually have to figure out the technical aspect of like making a podcast versus right now just like uploading these things to YouTube. I got to figure that out. Otherwise though, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, I love to hear from folks. Anything that I said that is interesting, anything I said that you want me to expand on, or just anything else, right? If this just resonates, would love to absolutely hear from you as I continue to grow this and to showcase more of what I am doing. And so thank you for hanging out. Thank you for listening in on today's episode of Becoming Together. See you next time.